The new Renault Triber is based on a heavily derived CMF-A platform from the Renault-Nissan Alliance. Yes, the same one that gave us the Kwid and Ready Go. But it is very modified, and so what you get is a much larger car. Much larger. And much wider. Seshan and I are in Goa to drive it. The big question, of course, that everyone has is, will that 1-litre engine be good enough to power this MPV-like hatchback? Well, it's a 1-litre petrol motor, which Renault calls its energy engine. The 999cc 3-cylinder engine is tuned to make 71 bhp and 96 Nm of peak torque. But it does offer up to 80% of its torque at about 2000 rpm. Claimed mileage, by the way, is 20 km per litre. And I'm actually quite impressed with this engine overall. I'll explain why. Now, right from the time this car came out, the big question's been, is that 3-cylinder 71 bhp motor good enough for a car of this size? Now, the engine has proved itself internationally, and so I have to say, it is actually surprisingly peppy and just makes a lot of noise though before it gets going. Sound insulation is good though, so the minute you put your windows up, you don't hear it as much, and it doesn't bother you therefore, that typical 3-pot clatter. But is it really punchy? No. Is it really powerful? No. But will it be sluggish? Will you find that you're left wanting, especially in traffic situations? Also no. And I think that's what Renault is playing for here, trying to make sure that you get a decent amount of fuel efficiency and yet not really offering you a fire starter of any kind, because the car isn't really trying to be a driver's performance-oriented car. It's trying to be more of an efficient people mover. Given that attribute, I think it does well enough, but could it have been more exciting? Sure. And I have a feeling that with the automatic, things will be a little bit more interesting because, well, you won't be having to constantly downshift, as I have had to. As of now, the engine comes mated to a 5-speed manual gearbox as standard. However, Renault has promised to bring an AMT version soon. The car moves with ease. The engine has a very rev-happy nature and redlines quickly. It gets up to higher speeds easily enough. And the big surprise? Well, we got some help from Vikrant and the Carwale team so that we could put it to the test with 7 people in. And the character does not change dramatically as I had expected. That's a huge plus and a huge relief. The car turns with ease, it's easy to park and maneuver as well, but I have to say in all of that, while a lot of Indian drivers will love the very smooth steering, for me that's a little bit of a miss because, you know, typically with European cars and even Renaults in particular, you expect there to be a little bit of a stiffer feel to the steering and a little better feedback. That's a little lacking on this and I'm surprised by it. I'm also surprised by the lack of stiffness in the overall handling of the car. I mean, it's just not as sporty as you would expect a Renault to be. Having said that, I know that it's a little silly to expect that given the kind of attribute and also the kind of usage that the company expects from this car. So, not a huge complaint area. And well, it's raining hard now, so at least I get a chance to test the car in really wet conditions. Okay, so that big question out of the way. Let me tell you more about the Triber. European styling, very evident in its design. The car looks smart, well built and fairly premium in its design appeal. While it's not pretty, it certainly looks modern and contemporary enough, and I think again the whole emphasis here on the design is to tell you how nice and wide this car is. And so the front grille and even the fact that you have horizontal DRLs and the almost exaggeratedly widened and enlarged scuff plate effect in front to give you a little bit of that SUV element, all of that contributes to making the car look really nice and wide, like it's sitting really planted. The signature Renault face has the black grille with chrome embellishments, the big logo in the center that's not as big as the global cars. The projector headlamps are standard, by the way. The LED daytime running lights, though, are only available with the top-end trim. Also, the 15-inch wheels that you see are optional with the top-end RXZ trim, whereas the standard wheel size is 14-inch for all variants. In terms of dimensions, the Triber is very much in the realm of the larger premium hatchbacks like the Maruti Suzuki Baleno and the Hyundai i20. In fact, it is just marginally bigger than both those bestsellers. But hold on, the Triber's positioning puts it more in Grand i10 or Swift territory. So when you compare those cars, the Triber appears massive. Because it is. In fact, its wheelbase is larger than the Hyundai Cretas and almost as much as the Dusters. Now, if you're surprised by those numbers, well, you should be. I was too, and that's because this car is kind of blowing a hole right in the middle of two different segments. You can see where all of that has been very smartly done. Very short overhangs, very tight compact unit there for the hood, and then really maximizing most of that length into the wheelbase. And you can see that the cabin space, therefore, the promise of that, even just looking at the car, is pretty immense. And then you've got that little trick, the stepped roof, which isn't immediately noticeable because of the roof rails, but certainly adds to the cabin space, especially for row 3. Okay, so the car looks impressive and big. But just as sharp as it looks from the outside, the inside is a tad drab and unimpressive. The cabin looks bland and very plain, yet the plastics are okay and the seats have a good look and are comfy despite being thin. What the car does offer is space, and that too lots of it, which is further accentuated by the color palette and the large windows. In fact, even in the third row, you'll never feel cramped or claustrophobic. The dual-tone dash is simple, and it, along with several other nooks in the car, offer tons of storage options. There are 2 glove compartments, and one of them that sits between the front seats is cooled. The flat-bottom steering wheel is a nice touch.
Now the Triber comes in 4 variants, RXE, RXL, RXT and RXZ, and it is pretty much loaded right from the base model. Features like the central cooled glove box and rear AC vents are standard from the RXL variant itself, whereas the top 2 trims get this touchscreen infotainment system that gets Apple CarPlay and Android Auto. However, features like this silver finish on the dashboard, push button start and rear camera is only available with the top end variant. That said, we would have liked features like the rear defogger and wiper available at least as an option from the mid-spec variant.
Renault has loaded the cabin with several small and big creature comforts, like a dedicated controller knob for the rear AC vents, a USB charging port at the front, and 12-volt outlets for the second and third row passengers. While the car does all right on safety, it could have been better. The seatbelt for the middle second row passenger and the third row are less than ideal. The passenger sitting in the middle in the second row will have to do with just a 2-point hip seatbelt, and the seatbelts on the third row do not get pretensioners. That's a negative in my book. Renault is also not offering ISOFIX child seat mounts, even as an option, which is a big miss considering the Triber is likely to attract a lot of family car buyers. And even though it's targeted at Tier 2 and Tier 3, the adoption for car seats for child safety is only going to go up. Dual front airbags are standard though, and the top end gets additional side front airbags too.
Now space is one of the biggest USPs of the Triber, but more than just the volume, what we love about this car is the seating configuration. For the second row seats get 60-40 split and sliding function, and while this larger section can be folded and pushed forward, this one here can be folded and tumbled for easy ingress and egress to the third row. Now I am in the third row, and I have to say this is more spacious than it appears to be, even for someone my size. And there are 2 main reasons for that. A, The second row seats which get sliding function, so you can adjust them to get the best possible knee space, and B, this bump in the roof that adds more headroom as well. For the third row passengers, you also get a bunch of creature comforts like these roof mounted air vents, a 12-volt charger and adjustable headrest.
You can get a 6-seater layout with 320 litres of boot space by removing one third row seat, or a 5-seater with 625 litres by removing the last row entirely, all thanks to the Easy Fix function. And it can be done in a few quick steps. Just push and remove the backrests, pull the cord underneath the seat and slowly pull the seat out of the anchor points. It does take a few tries to get it out smoothly, but you won't take more than a couple of minutes to remove them once you get the hang of it. In fact, Renault claims that the Triber offers about 100 different seating configurations. Honestly, we couldn't think of more than about 10 to 12. But you can also have a 4-seat configuration with one seat in the second and one in the third, while everything else is flattened out for more cargo. And now a look at the prices. The car has been priced surprisingly well. In fact, the prices have blown all of us away. Given its positioning, it is really an i20 rival for an i10 price. And yes, it is part MPV and part hatchback for sure. So the negatives that you have on the engine side, is that something that will really bother the buyer? I don't think so, at least not after they actually start to use the car, and which is why I think once it starts to catch on, people drive the car, well then its tribe will grow. Yes, I said that. But the point being that word of mouth on this possibly should hold it in good stead, because it becomes really practical, it becomes roomy, compelling enough. With those prices, it's basically a car that is a welcome addition to the hatchback segment and a car you can't ignore.